We are designated as the local planning agency for the county as described under Title 11, Chapter 163 of the Florida Statutes. We function under the authority of Articles 11 and 12 of the Putnam County Land Development Code. The primary responsibility of the Commission is to serve as an advisory body to hear and make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners on matters related to provisions of and proposed amendments to the Putnam County Comprehensive Plan and the Putnam County Land Development Code. The members of this commission will review each application and make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and we believe that will be at their regularly scheduled meeting on May 24th, 2022. Procedurally, we will call each case by name and number. A member of staff will then briefly explain to us the nature of each request, and we will take comments from the applicant or their representative, followed by public comments concerning the request. Please direct all comments or statements to the commission and not to other people in the audience. Before speaking, we will ask each person to be recognized, come forward to the lectern, and identify his or herself by name and address. After all persons wishing to speak have been heard, we will entertain a motion from the commission. The motion will be voted on by the commission members and become our recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners will make the final determination regarding each application. Before we move into our first case, I want to review our ethics statement that we make. As a member of the Putnam County Planning Commission, I pledge to come to meetings prepared for the items on the agenda, willing and ready to listen carefully and courteously to make informed decisions based on the facts presented and what I feel is in the best interest of the people and businesses of Putnam County. I will refrain from unnecessary interruptions, and I will be appreciative and respectful toward applicants, members of the staff, and other members of the commission. I will support the decisions made by the majority, and I will be fair and objective in all that I do as a member of the Putnam County Planning Commission. At this time, I need to ask if anyone has a conflict of interest with any of the cases that we're going to be hearing today. Okay, seeing none, that's good. Has anyone had ex parte communication with any of the applicants or people of interest with any of the cases we're going to be hearing today? Okay, thank you very much. Since we're waiting on our attorney, I think we'll go ahead and dispense with the minutes of our February meeting at this time rather than holding it till the end of the meeting. And I will ask the board if there are any additions, corrections, or deletions to the minutes. I believe there is an error in the minutes concerning the vote that was taken on the last case that we heard that day. It was not a unanimous decision. The vote was 5-2, as I recall. It's on the last page of the minutes. The motion carried 5-2 with, I believe it was Ms. Fortner and Mr. Schwing dissenting.
I know I did.
Aaron, do you remember?
She may not want to be with me. No, I think she.
Well, nobody does, but.
I think I did say no.
Okay, so it was Ms. Fortner and Mr. Schwing who dissented on that last case that we had, which was the Sawmill case. Yes, it was the amendment to the Land Development Code. So that was not a unanimous decision. Okay, anything else to the minutes? Hearing none, I call for a motion for the minutes to be approved or denied.
I'll move we approve the minutes from the previous meeting
As amended.
as amended.
I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Froelich. So Mr. Hafner and Mr. Froelich, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All opposed? Thank you. The minutes were approved unanimously. At this time, let's move into case R21-016. And you popped up real quick back there, sir.
Did.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. For the record, Joe Searley from Planning and Development Services. This is agenda item number 1. It is a rezoning REZ 21-16. The application is to amend the zoning map from a planned unit development, an expired planned unit development, excuse me, to residential 1 and conservation. The applicant is the Udo Family Management Trust, and there's a single parcel that is owned by Haviv and Cheryl Reutman. The property is located 0.45 miles east of North Highway 17 on both the north and south side of Bridgeport Road, where it intersects with West River Road and St. John's. The future land use currently is rural residential, a portion of the south is agricultural, and there's one single parcel that has a future land use designation of conservation. So there are 12 parcels equaling approximately 289 acres formerly approved as a St. John's Landing. It was the St. John's Landing PUD was adopted back in '91. The PUD had a 2-year expiration date on it, which was granted several extensions up until May 14, 2008, where at that point no extensions were applied for, no development permits or anything else were applied for as well, and it rendered it expired. What that does is no more development should be permitted on the parcel when the PUD's expired, unless the applicant extends the development agreement or removes the PUD zoning designation, which is why we're here today. So the applicant's looking to remove the expired PUD designation and rezone all the parcels within the PUD to R1 to allow development of single-family homes. There's one parcel included in this rezoning that has an underlying future land use map designation of conservation, which was done through these most recent comprehensive plan amendments, and so that would be looking to rezone to conservation. Most of the parcels are owned by the Udo Family Trust. However, there's one 4.42 acre parcel that's not contiguous to the rest of the PUD that I'll point out that's owned by the Roitman family. So as you can see, that one single 4.42 acre lot's up there to the northeast of the corner. The north portion is all residential, or is all PUD, and so is the south portion. There's one little lot, I don't have a pointer, but off to the right on the southern portion, close to the water, that kind of juts out. That's that conservation parcel that we were talking about that is currently maintains the land use designation of conservation that we would be rezoning to conservation. And here's the zoning showing just the boundary of the PUD and the surrounding residential 1 and R2 zoning. There's also agricultural to the south and to the west. A majority of the southern portion of this parcel is wetlands, and I believe most all of that is zoned agricultural, or has a land use of agricultural. Here is the future land use. You can see those wetlands, the southern portion of the map. All of its, majority of the property surrounding it to the north and to the east is rural residential. To the south and to the west is agricultural. So the current PUD allotted for permitted up to 490 single-family dwellings and various other uses on with a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. Rezoning to the R1 would render a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. However, the underlying future land use designation of rural residential limits the density to 1 dwelling unit per 2.5 acres. Those parcels that abut a paved roadway are permitted a maximum a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per acre. So the lot sizes would be roughly that size and half. Yeah, so those parcels that abut a paved roadway are permitted 1 dwelling unit per acre. The max potential density is 2 dwelling units per acre if central water and sewer is available. However, it's not located out there now. Development on that portion of the expired PD with an underlying agricultural future land use. On the portion I pointed out.
We've lost a microphone. It's one of those days, folks. Yes, sir. Can you turn the volume up? Sure. Can we get the volume up, Jake?
There we go.
Okay.
Got it.
I'm sorry, are the maps not showing up on the boards above? Okay, okay.
The volume is the highest that it goes, so.
Gabriel, I'm sorry.
Louder.
I'm sorry, Joe. Could you speak a little louder and a little slower?
Sure will. Absolutely. I got really lean into this mic. I apologize.
We're not gonna accuse him from not being around from around here, but we still love him. We're gonna keep him. But if you would talk a little louder and a little
Absolutely.
slower, a little closer to the microphone, that one gets you.
Sounds
Okay.
good to me. I'll go ahead and continue. So yeah, the land use, surrounding land use is rural residential, which is, the rest of that parcel is, and to the west is agricultural land use, and to the south is agricultural wetlands. As I was stating earlier, thank you, the rezoning to R1 would render a minimum lot size for that zoning district is 15,000 square feet. However, the underlying future land use designation of rural residential limits the density to 1 dwelling unit per 2.5 acres. Those parcels that abut the paved roadway, like Bridgeport, or I believe it's Bridgeport and the other two, that abut a paved roadway are permitted a maximum of 1 dwelling unit per acre. So this is essentially a down zoning, so it's not going to be increasing the density or anything. Development on that portion of the expired PUD on the southern portion of the boundaries of that PUD, which is mostly wetlands, has a land use of agricultural. They're requesting rezoning to R1. However, like I said, it's wetlands. It'd be rather difficult to develop on. I believe the density there is 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres and 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres if it abuts a paved road. Is that correct, Gabriel? I believe so.
In agricultural, yes, it is.
Okay. So with that being said, staff recommends approval of the request to amend the zoning designation from the expired PUD to residential R1 and conservation CN. And I'm here to answer any questions, as well as the rest of staff, and the applicant is here as well to answer questions.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one question for clarification. The lots, or the parcels, as they are divided right now within that area as it was before the PUD was established, those will come back and be the individual parcels in this, they'll be broken up into those parcels and not all conglomerated together.
That is correct. There's 12 separate parcels within that PUD.
Right. And the maximum times a parcel can be split in order to be subdivided is one time. So the maximum number of residential lots that can be made out of those 12 parcels right now is 24. We started out with how many in the PUD?
490, and there was some multifamily there as well.
Right, 490 units, whether they be houses, multifamily dwelling, or whatever, apartments, condos, whatever. You had 490 possible residences under this old plan unit development. Moving to what they're requesting, you're only going to have a maximum of 24 residential lots. So we'll take questions in just a minute from the public. But, so we're downsizing or down zoning, which means you're losing density. You're going to a more rural, much more sparsely populated area than you would have had if this PUD had come into fruition. So in this case, it's not bringing a lot more people into your area, it's removing that potential. So this is going back to individual parcels. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, I'd like to point out that the density, there's roughly 289 acres there. If they're getting one dwelling unit per acre, that's going to render more than 24 residential lots.
But you can only subdivide those parcels one time.
That is correct.
By a lot split, right.
By a lot split.
So you
Unless they do
could
type
put
one
more on it.
subdivision. Yeah.
But this is taking away that massive density that had been established in 1991. And this is putting it back to a much more rural, agrarian, rural residential complexion for this community. So I hope that helps you understand this. We understand it a little bit. He understands it a lot, and I'm trying to help you understand it a little bit of what I know. So with that being said, other questions that we have of Joe?
I've got one.
Ken?
This is what the applicant wants.
Speak into the microphone and sit up to the table now.
Gotta turn it on first.
Yeah, now sit up to the table.
This is what the applicant wants. This is not staff's recommendation.
That is correct.
Staff is recommending approval of what the applicant is requesting.
You're the
We'll get him up here in just a minute. But staff is recommending approval of what the applicant has requested. And that's where we are with this at this point. Any other questions of Joe? Okay. Would the applicant or the applicant's agent like to come forward and speak? Please state your name and your address and tell us who you are.
Joey Posey, 420 South Nova, Daytona Beach, and an attorney for the Udo family, and well, our office is at Storch Law Firm, and we've been their attorneys for probably 40 years, and there's a lot of history to this because it makes me sound like a crazy person that I want to get rid of the PUD. So if maybe I can give you a little background too, just to understand our thought process.
Okay, speak slowly.
Yes. Yes. So as you guys pointed out, that this was something that the original Frank Udo, the elder family patriarch has since passed. This was his brainchild. And when his son took over, probably 2008, just about, when you saw those extensions kind of go to the wayside, it really just didn't go anywhere. And then you had the recession, and it wasn't a priority. So when we got this back going, because we got a notice from the county saying, well, you have a lapsed PUD, what are you guys going to do? We tried to re-engage some attorneys locally to handle it, because we don't do work in Putnam County. And circumstance, one passed, one got conflicted out, and here we are, and we said, okay, well, we're currently just using the property as for forestry. It's a timber harvest. We really don't have any immediate plans to do anything. So from our perspective, if we're just going to fix this issue with the county, then might as well just try to match the zoning around us. And that's really how we got to where we are, that it was just simply, we're harvesting timber anyway, and we have a lapsed PUD that kind of is leaving us in this quagmire of, well, what do we do? Well, if we can just match the zoning and just settle the issue, then that solves the problem for everybody. And that was how we wanted to approach the issue, and obviously staff was helping us and guiding us in that direction too. And that's really the long and the short of how we got here. So
I do have another question.
Okay.
yes,
Finish first.
but other than that, there's no immediate plans for development. We're still doing the harvest, and other than that, if there's anything we can do to help, we're happy to. And I think I've told Joe this a million times, that if there's anything I can do to make this easier for everybody, we're happy to do it. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or if there's any follow-up.
I'm curious.
Microphone.
I'm curious. Do you have you don't have an ag exemption on any of this property, correct?
No, we do.
We do.
Yes,
Silviculture.
correct.
And you can keep that,
As long as we don't abandon it.
and you can keep that if we change it to the residential stuff and not change it to ag?
And this is maybe an extra conversation with your property appraiser, but as long as we don't abandon it, it's vested. So that's the trade-off, that, we're happy to continue the timber harvest, and at the same time, we'll match the zoning.
Well, as long as when you cut, you replant, you're okay.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a management plan and everything associated with it, so.
As long as you know what you're doing.
So
I
basically,
appreciate that. That's a good question.
so what you're saying to us is what we see when we drive down West River Road and down Bridgeport is not going to change.
No.
All that's changing is what's on paper with the county as far as the zoning designation for this parcel, or this tract of land.
Unless somebody comes out of the woodwork, pun intended, and changes what our plans are, that's how it's going to stay. So,
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Posey?
Question for staff.
Okay, Joe, Mr. Hafner has a question for you.
I got confused. We've said
You better
that
turn
there
that on. Is your microphone
were-
on?
No, I did not.
I'm
Thank you, you're the expert.
I got that.
We said that there were only, could only be 24 parcels.
But I said that.
There are 12 and then split to 24. But then you commented you could still do 1 unit per acre.
Correct.
So you would have to go through,
Development review process.
Subdivision.
Yeah.
all right, that's my question. Thank you.
But there's none of that on the horizon.
None
so-
of that's on the horizon, and and maybe I'm diving a little deep here, but given the wetlands, given the lack of utilities and some of the road improvements that would be necessary, that's a big task if we were even going to get close to any density that was already vested. So I highly doubt anything's going to change in a near or even far future with what this property's currently doing, so.
It's turning oxygen back into the atmosphere.
Exactly. Everybody
That's-
wins.
That's good. Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Posey? Thank you so much, and if we have any more, we'll call you back. Now, I'm going to go through the list of speaker cards that were handed in, and if you choose not to speak at this time, basically what people do when we have a hearing like this is if you have strong feelings either for or against the recommendation, you would come up and you'd tell us what you think. This is your time to tell government what you think. And this is our time to listen to you. And I can tell you that it's very gratifying to us to look out and see so many people who have an interest in this process to be here this afternoon. So thank you for being here before, we go to the next case and you all will get up and leave us because you don't want to listen to the next case, which is your right. And that's fine with us. But we appreciate your being here is what I'm trying to say. So, Terry Goodwin, do you wish to speak? Okay, please come up to the microphone. Give us your name and your address. And please address the board.
Okay. I'm Terry Goodwin, live at 212 St. John's Drive. Our property is probably 2,000 feet from the west property line of parcel 0020-0010. We moved here from Jacksonville about a year and a half ago, and we fled Jacksonville for the very same reason that we're seeing happening here, the development, traffic, and crime. And my concerns are that West River Road is a two-lane road. Bridgeport is a two-lane road. Is the increase in traffic, and who's going to pay for the infrastructure?
Well, right now, nothing is going to change because they're taking away the planned unit development that would have technically allowed nearly 500 units or residential units to be put there. That's going away. And
Right,
we're going back to just the 12 parcels, and as Mr. Posey, who's the agent for the owner, has stated, they have no intention of doing anything with this land except harvesting trees and replanting. So there's not going to be any development at this point. If there were to be somebody that came in and said, I've got, $5 billion and I want to buy this land, and they said, oh yes, we'll be glad to sell it to you for $5 billion, then those people would, if they want to put a lot of houses out there, they've got to go through a subdivision process. And that takes a lot more time, and it would be another public hearing. And you would have another opportunity. But right now, all we're looking at is turning this back into what it was before 1991, which is much more rural and much less potential for development.
Right. But I think somebody stated that there would be 48 lots or whatever.
Well, there are 12 lots right now. There are 12 parcels of land. But a great number of that acreage, a great lot of that acreage is in wetland. So it's undevelopable.
Right. But what, on those 24 parcels, what would stop somebody from building an apartment building that multi-family dwelling?
Because it doesn't have the infrastructure to support it, because there's no public utilities in that area. If somebody were to come out here and want to do that, they would be responsible for upgrading and maintaining the roads at the accepted level of service. They would be responsible for putting in all the infrastructure necessary, and they would have to prove to the county that this was the best thing to do on that land. And right now, what Mr. Posey is bringing to us from the owner is an application that says, we want to keep this rural, we don't want to do anything else. Now, like I said, it doesn't preclude somebody with more money than they have good sense coming in here and buying that land and wanting to do that. But as far away as it is from infrastructure, it's not in an urban reserve or an urban service area, which is where we have our high-density residential dwellings. So this is going back to rural residential and agriculture, which is low density.
So what is it zoned now?
It's zone planned unit development, which is the theoretical, I'm going to build nearly 500 dwelling units here. That's being replaced with going back to what it was before of rural residential. R1.
Okay. Which is like 2.5 acres per lot?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's
When was it zoned prior for the 450?
That was 1991.
1991?
Mm-hmm. Pardon? That was the last, yeah, that was the last big bubble in the economy. So, and then nothing was done, and they got an extension, because a planned unit development, when they set one of those up, they have to put into the agreement with the county that they're going to begin development by a certain date and complete development by a certain date. And if they fail to meet those dates, then they have to get an extension. Well, a few extensions were granted up until about 2008. And at that time, nothing else happened. So we've been sitting there for 14 years with nothing happening to this land. They've been harvesting trees, maintaining it in silviculture. And at this point, they've got abandoned the PUD, basically. And that's just a superstructure zoning that allows for multi-faceted development. And now they want to just take it back to the way it was back before 1991.
Okay. I understand.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's beautiful property. There's deer, there's turkeys, there's 500-year-old oak trees back in there. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. I just hate to see, it bulldozed and, cleared for houses or anything.
It's a little piece of paradise. So I was out there this afternoon, so I know. Having seen it, I love that kind of land. I'm a native of this county, so it's a good thing. So most of us are. And
Well, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Is there anyone else? Before I can go through the list. Let me go through the list. Haviv Reitman? Would you like to speak? Okay. Okay. John Calderon? Okay, come on up, Mr. Calderon. Please give us your name and address.
John Calderoni, 276.
Pull the mic up a little bit.
John Calderoni, 276 Harbor Drive. I'm curious if the property is currently for sale. When I look on Zillow, I see what looks to be that property for sale for $2.5 million.
Mr. Posey, I'm going to ask you to answer that question to us. Is that your only question,
Yep.
sir? Can you come up, Mr. Posey, and give us an answer to that question?
That is correct, and it has been for sale for over a decade. So it's not anything he's actively pursuing, but that is correct. And just to be transparent, that if there is somebody that comes in and wants to, like you said, has the bucket of money and says, I've got more, money than sense, here's the property, you got to go back through you guys for any approvals. But from our perspective, it's, the gentleman lives in Edgewater, Florida. And he barely makes it up here. So it's not something that he actively keeps track of, the Udo family, because this was the father's brainchild. And it just makes sense that while we're waiting, happy to continue the timber harvesting, but there's no active need for him to be managing it. And if there is a partner that wants to take it over, great, not a problem. It's got to come back through you guys if there was any change to the property, so.
Right.
But to answer the question, that is correct. I want to be transparent about that, but it's been for sale for over a decade.
And you're going to keep it listed?
Well, I don't imagine he wants it, he's gonna take it down, but, it's one of those things where
You're
it's.
going backwards anyway, so.
Exactly. I'm just trying to fix an issue from a notice I got from the county, so.
You're doing some housekeeping work, but yet at the same time, you're creating questions, and that's okay.
And I know it looks a little scary, but that has been the case for as long as I can remember, that it's not something, and you can imagine too, from the original PUD, that it takes a developer partner to take on that, and nobody's taken it in
Well,
30 years.
that's gone. The PUD will be gone, hopefully, we can get through
Exactly.
this
So-
process. And then it will be 12 individual parcels that would be for sale.
Exactly.
Rather than one single parcel that's lumped together right now,
And the appetite for that is probably a little less, so.
with the wetlands in there. so
Exactly.
yes. Okay.
Well, everybody that's sitting out there should be in favor, not opposed, because it's gonna go backwards.
Right. And it sounds counterintuitive, but I'm being honest with you.
No,
that is
we
our
understand
intent.
it. It is a little,
I don't know.
it's a little daunting. It's a little daunting sometimes, but thank you so much, Mr. Posey. Scott Keegan.
Mine was answered.
Okay, James Jones. Come on down.
James Jones, I own property, 10 acres at 129 Bridgeport Road.
Okay,
I've heard plenty of talk about this huge parcel that they've been clearing, okay? That parcel borders my west end of my property and all of the back end of my property. And then, and I can understand rezoning that from PUD. I don't understand, but the rest of these other parcels that haven't been mentioned that I recall, there's 5 parcels here. They're on my east side, okay, and across Bridgeport Road to the north. What were those originally zoned? They weren't PUD.
no, they were back into R1.
So they were R1, they are R1 now?
They were.
And
Zoning, when you have a PUD, the PUD replaces the zoning category for those parcels that are being lumped together.
okay, but these, you mean the large parcel?
The whole
Or
thing.
are we talking about all of
We're
it?
talking about the individual, 12 individual parcels will go back to being R1.
Okay, and what's,
I think his concern is he thought just the large parcel was the PUD, but all of those parcels was the PUD.
They were lumped together.
All of them were one PUD,
oh, the ones
not
across,
just the large parcel behind your home.
oh, okay, okay.
You th-
Well, it's not a home, it's 10
I
acres.
remember that little place, I think that was gonna be their clubhouse or something.
Yeah. And if you think about it as a jigsaw puzzle, you had this one big piece and you had these other little pieces. Well, when you put them all together, you had the PUD. But you take the PUD away, you take the pieces apart and they become individual pieces again.
Okay, and this is all residential. If there were to be homes built on this would be all actual homes, not mobile homes, mobile home parks, none of that.
It's zoned R1 and there would be,
That's correct. Only site-built and modular construction is allowed.
right. You wouldn't be able to bring in 10-year-old mobile homes.
Manufactured homes. Okay. I'm not happy about being surrounded and then all this rezoning, but
It's actually putting it back the way it was.
yeah, but it's all one owner now.
Right. One
all-
owner owns 12 parcels of land.
Yeah.
And he did before, but he
Well,
probably,
a lot of, I think the Carter's property on the east side of mine has been bought, was
Okay.
purchased recently,
okay.
okay? And
Well,
I don't know about the property on the north side of me, which a house burned down there a zillion years ago. I don't know who used to own that. Maybe Carter's owned it too, but
Joe or Gabe, can you shed any light on that?
The, shed any light on, what was the question, sir?
the property across Bridgeport Road from my 10 acres.
I'm looking at your 10 acres now. Could you, is it 129 Bridgeport Road?
That's,
Okay. This is all currently owned, just to clarify, it's all owned by the Udo family right now, other than a smaller portion that's on the river that's owned by the Reutemann family.
okay, well, that property I'm talking about is not on the river.
Right, no, so the property that's north of his property is owned by the Udo family, but I caution the discussion on ownership. I don't think ownership really has anything to do with what we're talking about right now. This is a rezone. It's currently 12 parcels. It's unified under one PUD. It's currently encumbered by an expired PUD that does not allow any development whatsoever. So the county has an obligation to zone this to an appropriate zoning district that complies with the comprehensive plan. There were portions of this property that were previously zoned AE, but agricultural, but agricultural no longer complies with the land use designation of the comprehensive plan. Most of this was R1, so it goes back to, it will all be rezoned with the exception of one small parcel on the river, which will go to conservation because of the conservation land use that it has. But currently, there's no option for development on this property, and the PUD has to be removed or resurrected. So,
Or sit there in noncompliance.
right.
Okay. Does that help, Mr. Jones?
Yes, ma'am, it does. I just want you all to consider density
Oh, yeah.
in that area. That's
And that's
a
very much
serious-
apart with rural residential, with R1. It's not rural it's R1.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Jerry Lobenthal? Okay, thank you so much. And Cheryl Pugh?
Yeah, I'll speak.
Okay, come on up.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Pugh. I live on 316 Tarpon Boulevard, Palatka. Some people say it's Bostwick, but I don't have that address. I would like to see the map. Everything, it's hard to see, plus I got new glasses and they're being a pain. But everything in red is what's being rezoned?
Right, everything is outlined in red.
So the one little parcel off there at the opening of my canal?
That
That is part
is
of it?
not
So-
contiguous with everything else, but that's part of this, was part of this PUD.
Okay, so it's going back to R1.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's what I want to do. Is there a way to get a copy of that map? Gracias.
I gave her mine.
Thank you.
I don't have but one copy of that map, I'm sorry. Actually, you can, they're online, you can get it online.
Is there any way we can get Wi-Fi out there?
Speak to your county commissioner. I believe that's I believe that's Jeff Rawls' territory. Actually, there, if you read the paper today, Representative Payne made a presentation yesterday at the Board of County Commission meeting, and I've got a couple extra copies that have that outlined if anybody wants them. That one of the initiatives that's happening is the rural Wi-Fi area, the rural internet enhancement, and county's looking at getting quite a bit of infusion of money to help make that happen. I live in Lake Como, which is just as bad as you have. I was getting 3.1 with my internet service, and I was paying as much as somebody who was getting 100. So I understand. I've been begging for this too. But patience. They're working on it. That's all I can tell you. That's why we like the country. I want to live in the country, but I want my Wi-Fi, okay? Does that make sense? I'm an internet baby. Okay, are there any other questions or any other people who would like to speak? You have another question? You want to come up and ask one question?
What's your definition of a modular home? If you'll come up to the podium, please. Record.
Yeah, we need it on the record. What's our definition of a modular home, Mr.?
Modular home.
Modular construction meets the Florida Building Code, but it's assembled in a factory. So it's not a mobile home that's certified by HUD.
Not a trailer.
Correct. That's right.
It's similar, but it can't just be dragged in there.
It has to have a foundation that is compliant with the Florida Building Code, a crawl space, a slab, any other foundation that would be approved by the Florida Building Code.
And is there a minimum of square footage?
No, sir, there's not a minimum of square footage anywhere in the county, other than what the Florida Building Code requires, which is approximately 400 square feet with all of the requirements that a home is supposed to have.
And in that respect, we are going to begin very soon reviewing and revising the Land Development Code, which does include all of the regulations concerning the different types of housing. So stay tuned.
So at this point with the zoning change, it's possible we could have a modular home farm?
It would be no different, sir, and would you like me to address this, Madam Chair? or-
Yes, sir, please
Okay.
do.
It would be no different than the majority of the development that's out there right now. There's a number of mobile homes in the area. The character would be approximately the same, R1. If someone comes in and wants to plat the subdivision, which would require a public hearing, as the chairman advised, then they could build a subdivision with infrastructure paid by the developer, of course, with modular homes or site-built homes.
But it is possible we could have that.
Yes, sir.
We could have that anywhere in Putnam County. We could have that anywhere in the state of Florida.
But I wish to clarify that this is, again, the PUD has no development rights under it right now. They are unable to use it even for single-family purposes. One of the reasons that we brought this, that the applicant was initially contacted by the county is because a portion of the PUD was sold to the Reutemann family, and they are unable to build their home on their land until the PUD is removed. So we have an encumbrance on the property that has to be removed in order to bring it into conforming status.
Yep.
Okay.
Does that help?
I have no more questions, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Posey, you're okay?
And I apologize, but again, happy to represent that we're not doing that. So
Okay.
if that's on the record, that these will be, full single-family homes, if that eventually happens, there's no
Right.
plans for mobile home park, there's no plans for even a modular, homes that, I don't want to get caught on the rabbit hole of worst-case scenarios. So I just want to make that clear.
No, and all we can address is this moment in time. We don't have the crystal ball, but are there any other questions or anyone else who would like to speak? I don't want us to get bogged down in the minutia of this, because right now, this is going to, on paper, keep this property the way it is, basically. That's what's happening. Instead of renewing this PUD, which would say, okay, they can still build their 489 units. But that's going away. Okay? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion and vote.
I move we approve, it says it's on, am I not talking into it? I move we approve case number R21016 to change the zoning map to, from PUD to R1 in conservation.
Okay, do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Danzler, second. So we have Ms. Fortner and Mr. Danzler. Discussion. Any conversation, any discussion? All right, hearing none, I call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All opposed? Okay, we're carried with our majority of 7.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, sir.
I took these maps out of my packet here, and it's got them redlined around. It kind of tells where they are if y'all need some of them. I've got a few copies here if you need any.
Okay. Thank you very much for being concerned about where you live and being concerned about what's going on with the property surrounding you and for being here. Means a lot to us. You're welcome to stay. Might get more interesting, might be boring, I don't know. Okay, with that being said, we'll move on to case number R22001. Who's going to be presenting that for us? Joe, are you back up again?
It's me again. I'm waiting for the monitors to kick on.
Okay. We'll give them a chance to get out of the room. Yeah, thank you for being here.
See, you was right, they all left.
I knew they would. Nobody loves us when we do what they, we finish work on them. Nobody loves us. If you don't mind taking your conversations out in the foyer so we can move on with our meeting.
Testing, okay. It's not working.
I thought it came through.
I thought it was coming through too.
I heard it. Or just grab the one next to you.
That's what I did.
Okay. All righty. Okay, we'll move on then. Joe, are you ready, Joe, or are we waiting on the technology again? Okay. Oh, I can sign the minutes while we're waiting.
It's just coming up now.
Nancy, do you want me to make that change on the minutes, on the paper themselves? Pardon? So do I need to sign it, make the changes and then sign it, or are you going to give me an? Okay.
Is it F5? Perfect, okay. All right, Madam Chair, I'm ready to present.
Just a second. Let me write. All right, go right ahead, sir.
Okay, this is agenda item number 2. This is also a rezoning. To amend the zoning map from commercial retail C2 and agriculture to commercial general C3 to allow for a boat sales and service sales center. The applicant is Stephen D. Hunter. The subject property is located at the junction of Powerline Road and State Route 207. The current future land use is urban service. The current zoning is agricultural and retail. So it's a 6 point, looks like 3 parcels, but it's, they've been combined recently and are under one parcel identification number. They equate to 6.38 acres. The north portion of the parcel is, north half of it has a zoning designation of commercial retail, C2, and the southern half has a commercial designation, or I'm sorry, a zoning designation of agricultural. The applicant's requesting to rezone the entire 6.38 parcel to the C3 zoning. Here is an aerial of the parcel. As I said, it's got, it'll be taking access off Powerline Road more than likely. Adjacent to it is some residential and agricultural uses. One thing I want to point out here is that along this 207 corridor, it's all has a land use of urban service, which is now kind of budgeting into a commercial corridor, or a mixed-use corridor, I guess we'd say at the moment. There's several commercial future land use designations north and south of this parcel. So right now, as it stands, the commercial 2 zoning and agricultural zoning do not allow for boat sales and service. Per section 45-83 of the Land Development Code, the C3 zoning designation allows for the recreational vehicle and boat sales service use. The parcel has an underlying land use of urban service, as I mentioned, and this, which consists of areas where infrastructure has been provided or will be provided within the next 15 years, which is why you're seeing more and more commercial development come through there. The urban service land use designation encourages the expansion of commercial and residential development along this corridor. Portions of State Route 207 currently have water and sewer infrastructure, which serves to encourage a mixed-use development. Additionally, the subject property abuts 207 and surrounded by mostly residential uses to the east, west, and south. There are several commercial zone parcels that I just pointed out to the north and south of the subject property that also abut residential and agricultural zone parcels. Most of this portion is rural in nature with a significant presence of commercial entities to the north and south, and probably see more pop up over the years. The applicant, to mitigate the impacts of, if any, to surrounding residential, is required to provide a 20-foot wide Class B buffer between residential uses to the east. There's also perimeter buffering will be required along all vehicle use areas, such as parking. If there's any open storage or outdoor display, they would be required to provide a 20-foot wide Class B buffer between that and any residential uses. And what the Class B buffer consists of is a 6-foot masonry wall or fence, 6-foot evergreen plants at the time of planting with 75% opacity, low-growing evergreen plants, and an 8-foot green evergreen canopy trees planted no more than 20 feet apart. So that's quite a significant buffer. Staff does recommend approval of the request to amend the zoning designation from agricultural to commercial retail to commercial general C3 to allow for the boat sales and service center. I'm here to answer any questions, as well as I believe the applicant is here as well.
Any questions of staff? Okay, would the applicant owner like to come forward and speak? Please give us your name and your address, and also be ready if we have any questions.
Hi, my name is Stephen Hunter. I live at 136 Jim Bryant Road in East Palatka. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Hunter? Nope, I don't think we have any.
Oh, isn't this a blessing?
You're really good.
I'm glad I'm not crying about moving from Jacksonville and trying to figure out what's going to go around me. I tell you.
Well, Putnam County is growing. It's a little scary for some people.
It sure is. There's a lot of people that have come here from the busier places trying to seek refuge. I understand that.
So it's a good thing. We're not going to argue about that. Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter.
Thank you.
They all want to buy boats, too.
Well, we do have a lot of places to use a boat.
Have some fun in that.
So, all right, is there anyone else in the audience wishing to speak either for or against this application? Hearing none, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion and/or motion and vote.
I see nothing wrong with this one at all. I can't find anything.
Do you want to make a motion?
No, ma'am. I got a gentleman right here that handles all my motions.
Gee. Like to talk, but you won't make a motion?
Don't believe a word he says.
About to that point.
Your turn. Make my motion for me. I don't know what the number is.
E-motion. It's R22001.
I move we approve.
Microphone, it's not on.
I got it. No problem.
Thank you, okay, good deal.
Gotta help your emotion maker.
I move we approve case R 22-001.
Do I hear a second for that particular case?
I'll second.
I'm gonna let Joey second it. Mr. Froelich seconded that. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All opposed? Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. This will move on to the Board of County Commissioners at their May 23rd meeting. May 24th meeting. So, thank you. Okay, we're going to move into case CA 21005. If you did not happen to catch the Board of County Commission meeting, I know, Mr. Schwing, you were there.
I was there.
And thank you for pointing out that discrepancy in the minutes to the Board of County Commissioners. I'm glad we caught that. This is the Codes Amendment dealing with sawmills. And the Board of County Commissioners has sent it back to us. And basically, they had some recommendations and suggestions. They also said if we want to send it back to them the same way we sent it to them in the first place, we can. But staff does have recommendations on this, and we will hear that. We'll hear the report. We will not go through a lengthy presentation on sawmills. Mr. Morris, we're going to give you 5 minutes. And we'll be glad to take any questions you may have, or we may ask you questions. But I think everyone who is here today was here in February when we heard your original presentation. But the Board of County Commissioners felt that there needed to be some changes made in this. And if you need to recall it, it was dealing with no longer using, requiring a supplemental, or requiring a special use permit for a sawmill to be used in a residential or in an agricultural area. So with that, Zach, would you please give us the Reader's Digest version?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, chair members. Just to recap what Madam Chair said, this is a remanded revision to the staff recommendations for the Planning Commission Land Development Code Text Amendment, CA 21005. Just to briefly run through the PowerPoint, I did make it to share with you guys. Oh, it is working. Okay.
Yep.
It's not showing on my end. Just give me 1 second. Please.
Okay. We actually have it.
Okay, so the application for the LDC amendment requires 2 public hearings. It was first heard here February 9th, 2022. The first hearing went to the Board of County Commissioners March 22nd, where they requested staff make changes to the recommendations, be remanded back to Planning Commission for another recommendation. The staff recommendations have been added to this presentation, and an addendum was added to the staff report. Again, Mr. Morris requested to amend sections 4559 and 4572 of the Land Development Code.
Okay, we're still stuck on that original application history.
Oh, I see. That's what I don't. I got you. This is yours, right? This is, yeah. It's just this one here, the slideshow. Still running. Questions is still running.
There we go.
So the proposed LDC text amendment proposes to revise allowances for sawmills. Just trying to get through everything that we've already been familiarized with.
I was gonna say, mine's going real fast.
Okay, so these are the new revised text amendment languages that we would see if it's approved.
Let me stop you just a minute. We still have the applicant's request on the books. We either choose to deny or accept that. If we deny it, then we have the opportunity of taking the staff recommendation. Is that correct? Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
So
there are 2 in your packet. There's the original staff recommendation and then the new.
the addendum. So at the last meeting, we denied both, if I recall correctly, both the applicant's request and the staff recommendation. And we said we would rather choose to look at this and address it when we get to that portion of the Land Development Code. County Commission sent it back, and you all have come back now and given us a more detailed amendment to the Land Development Code in addition to what you had already said. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We removed some of the provisions that, the criteria that the commission did not agree to, that they showed consensus on not agreeing to.
Okay.
And addressed the issues of adverse impacts in different manners.
Okay. So as I understand it, your recommendation still requires a special use permit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just so that, because that doesn't say it in here. Go right ahead.
Okay, yes, ma'am. So the changes that the staff has proposed for LDC Section 4559, we would add text to include the on-site sawmills. Otherwise, sawmills was not changed. Then we proposed adding new text for off-site sawmills where wood is sourced from trees grown off-site and may be grown on-site as well. Off-site sawmills must abide by the following supplemental standards. The sawmill must be located on a parcel of land equal to or exceeding 15 acres in size. The sawmill equipment must be maintained according to the original manufacturer's specifications. The sawmill operation within 500 feet of residential structures located on property not owned by the sawmill operator shall be required to provide sound mitigation in the form of an enclosure, solid masonry wall, or other means of sound attenuation as allowed by the Zoning Board of Adjustments. The sawmill shall not be in operation from dusk until dawn and is prohibited on Sundays and county-recognized holidays. The sawmill shall not be located on property within a recorded or unrecorded residential subdivision as defined by the Land Development Code. And if the sawmill is to be accessed along a private roadway, the sawmill operator shall be responsible for maintenance of the roadway to the standards required for that particular road classification. Examples given would be local collector roads of the private roadway from the point of access for the sawmill to the nearest county-maintained roadway. The sawmill operator shall be required to provide proof of a maintenance agreement to the Department of Planning and Development Services within 30 days of approval of a special use permit for this use. If the sawmill is to be accessed along a public roadway, then the sawmill operator shall be responsible for the provisions of adequate roadway facilities to handle the impacts of the proposed development and maintain the county's adopted level of service standards concurrent with those impacts in compliance with the concurrency management system of Article 5 of the Putnam County Comprehensive Plan.
Okay.
And the rest of the presentation is what you're already familiar with from the last hearing.
So are there any questions of staff concerning those new provisions that they are placing on this proposed revision?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Schwing, we'll take you first.
Are you, I was at the county commission meeting. I heard everything that you said there, and I heard everything that the 5 people up here said. The applicant, if I'm not mistaken, has applied to us for, lack of a better term, a hobby sawmill. In other words, one that you could have at your house for your personal use. I could have at my house for mine.
We're not designating the different type of sawmill here, and what staff is recommending has nothing to do with the size of the motor, has nothing to do with the size of the mill. Is that correct?
Well, that's where I have a big problem, because that's not what we were asked to look at.
Well,
We were asked to look at a hobby.
well, what we were asked to look at was a sawmill 40 horsepower or less.
That's
And
one
that's
way
wh-
to guide it.
Well,
yes.
that's what was in their original request.
Yes.
And that was what we originally denied and said we're not going to take that.
I wasn't happy when I voted no then, I'm gonna vote no now. But
Okay.
what I want to know, why are we even talking about as you say, one sawmill? We're not determining whether it's on this side for individual use or this side for commercial use. Commercial use, I have no problem with you regulating it any way you want to do it. But you're infringing upon my rights as an individual citizen if I want to do something on my personal property.
Okay, I think the way this is written, I think we need to go back and look at it. There are two sections. The first one is on-site sawmill where the wood is sourced from trees grown on the site of the sawmill. So if you own 50 acres and you got a bunch of pine trees or cedar trees or oak trees or whatever, and you want to mill those trees on-site at a sawmill that you own and operate on the same piece of property as those trees are, there are no restrictions. You have to get an SUP, but nothing else. And if you want to operate a sawmill where logs are brought onto your property, then these supplemental conditions must be met in addition to whatever the zoning board of adjustments would put on.
We had that conversation at the county commission meeting.
Well, they had that conversation.
I had that conversation with them at that meeting.
This is not the county commission meeting. They've sent it
but-
back to us.
I'm telling you what we discussed at that meeting. I asked a specific question about Jeb Tootin, who is a guy that cuts trees down, would bring some lumber, some logs to my hobby sawmill.
And that would be the off-site sawmill as designated in this particular recommendation from staff.
And the 5 county commissioners had no problem with that because we were using up wood instead of taking it out to the
I think
landfill.
there's a matter of interpretation there, Ken, but this is what staff, in working with the county attorney, has brought back to us today.
Well, I understand that, but
And that has nothing to do with, other than the county commission sending it back to us. That's all, that's their part of it, was sending it back to us. And we can't discuss, we don't know their total intent. We only can discuss our issues and our intent.
well, the issue that I have is lumping together the individual with, if I'm not mistaken, I asked the question, and I think I was told, we only have 2 commercial sawmills in the county. One being the Cypress Place up 17.
That would have to be answered by staff. That would have to be answered by staff, please.
And I'd be glad to address some clarification here. I don't know the exact number of industrial sawmills that we have in the county. I think it's between 2 and 3. But with regard to the number of sawmills that are being operated on agricultural property, I have no idea. And I don't think that we could ever know that because there are many people operating them behind hundreds of acres of woods. But the clarification that I'd like to issue is that the reason that staff drafted an ordinance initially addressing commercial use of sawmills with the use of wood sourced from off-site is because this was the original request of the applicant. Afterwards, it was, the narrative changed a little bit and it was mainly framed as a hobby sawmill issue, which we have clarified to the applicant several times is already allowed as an ancillary use. And I shouldn't call it a sawmill, it's a saw, a hobby saw at a home. The reason that staff doesn't want to get into regulating hobby saws is because we can't just put a carte blanche use in there that says hobby saw. Because that means that then everyone would stick their saw, potentially a sawmill operation, full scale, underneath that allowance in residential areas and any areas, and we'd have a problem. And so in order not to affect people who are operating hobby saws, we would rather it not be included in the land development code and just be treated as an ancillary use, just like any other use on a piece of property, a pool, the use of a lawnmower, the use of any other power equipment on a piece of property as an accessory use to that property. So,
But you do have heartburn as far as a special use permit comes in. You want to require that for the individual person. I have no problem requiring it for the commercial guy.
So if I may address that, it doesn't matter whether it's an individual person or a corporation. An individual person can run a commercial sawmill just as much as a corporation can. So we can't go by the number of employees or anything else like that. We have to go by what the nature of the use is and how it changes the character of the area. And yes, we would only recommend these changes based upon the requirement of a special use permit, because we have so many varied situations in the county where we have vast agricultural areas, some with tiny residential subdivisions sandwiched in between huge lots. And so we have to look at each case individually and make sure that the enjoyment of the property for those owners is not going to be diminished simply by the introduction of a sawmill, because someone wants to use a sawmill for commercial purposes and then wants to, in a sense, classify it as a hobby sawmill, but it really isn't. It changes the nature of the use of the property, or excuse me, the character of the area.
And I think the key factor there is it's site-specific. The SUP is for the site. It's for the property, is given a supplemental use permit to have that operation going on that property. It has nothing to do with the individual, the size of the saw, or anything else. But it looks at the complexion of the neighborhood, looks at the complexion of the area, looks at all the infrastructure that's there, the roads, everything else. And what staff is doing is designated two different categories. One where wood is sourced on-site, and one where wood is not sourced on-site. Wood sourced on-site would still require a special use permit based on the individual site, and where wood is sourced off-site would have these other criteria attached to it. That's what's...
like vanilla and chocolate ice cream, you know.
Well, those two categories could be like vanilla and chocolate ice cream, but they are two separate distinctive categories. Tom, you had a question.
Yes, at the last meeting, we had about a 2-hour presentation. None of us really knew much about a sawmill before that meeting, other than you cut wood. I asked the question of the staff, have we had any complaints or any developer coming in that wanted to open up a sawmill? And they said, not to their knowledge. We then decided here that we were all talking on things we really didn't have too much information on, other than what we heard at that meeting.
And we wanted to put it off until...
This has been kicked around in this county going back by the documentation we got to last year, August, September. There's been communications between our staff and
the applicant.
the gentleman who came in to try to get this thing approved in February of this year. And what we decided at the last meeting, that none of us really knew much about a sawmill. The staff doesn't know much about sawmills. There's only 2 in the county, as I understand.
Well,
There's a lot of hobby ones that go
Yeah.
in people's backyards. But this is kind of generalizing it all, so that we're making it a land use master plan designation. We decided to leave this thing go until we reevaluate the whole new proposal on the land master use plan, because if we get into commercial sawmills, just think about what we're going to get into. Off-site trees coming to a location in a county. We haven't even thought about that one. How many times have you gotten behind a log truck with those 60-foot poles hanging out? The thing's way over tonnage. Every cop in the neighborhood stops them and gives them tickets because they're overloaded. Now picture that going through a residential area, which this is amendment, which I read, allows it as long as it's a county designated road. Well, I live on a county designated road, County Road 309. It's 2 lanes, one north, one south. There's a big development going on County Road 209 that may want to put a sawmill in. And I sure wouldn't want those log trucks coming in, bringing in lumber from outside, because remember one thing, if you're going into something commercial now, and it's in general of a sawmill, you've got logs coming in, you've got logs being sawed and cut up with small pieces of wood, then you have the pieces of wood going back out to get treated. Because there's not much wood you can use in a sawmill that's going to be for commercial use that's not treated. Then it goes to a treatment plant, back again to a residential community, back again to the sawmill for designation where it's going to be stored and sold. So there's a lot more to it than I think we can address just by approving something because we have something in front of us. I said, let it go like we did before. Let's bring it up where we can all sit down, get experts in from the field. We only got 2 sawmills, let's bring them in. Let's see what they think is the best way to go, because I certainly don't know the best way. I see some pitfalls in planning, approving something that we don't know what's gonna happen, both on commercial, both on hobbies. We have no problem right now with sawmills in the county. Based on our own staff that we asked back in February, I asked the question. Not one complaint. And not one developer has come in that wanted to put a sawmill in it, then refused. So why are we trying to pass
Right.
something that we need a whole lot more information that's going to set the trend for the next 5 years? I'd say leave this thing go, do exactly what we did before, vote this down, let it sit when we do our master land use revision.
Okay,
again.
hold that thought, because we're still talking with the staff report right now. We need to hear from the applicant,
Okay.
and then we need to bring it back to us. But hold that thought, Tom.
No question from the applicant. I asked if the applicant was a developer or was he going to be a future
Right.
sawmill owner? Answer was no. He's just representing the sawmill industry. I'd rather hear from many people, that's all.
Well, and I think one of the problems that I had then and I still have now is that a special use permit protects both the applicant and the surrounding neighborhood and surrounding landowners. So I have a real heartburn with that, but I'll hold that thought for another time in another place, which will be in about a few minutes from now. Any other questions of staff?
I've got a question and a comment. I honestly don't know why anybody would want to bring this to anybody's attention at this point, because it hasn't been a problem. I mean, I think we heard there was no complaints, and I think that's the reason that I was really leaning toward, or last time, you know, that when we voted, we said, well, there's not a problem. Why are we trying to fix something? There's not a problem. But it seems like that, from what I understood from the Board of County Commissioners, they're in favor of allowing the 40 horsepower sawmills and lower, because they're saying they'd rather see the wood cut up. I think that wood's getting cut up anyway, but and it's, you know, if the Board of County Commissioners is really the reason this came back, is because they wasn't happy with our decision last time.
Well, in fact, one of the members of the county commission said very clearly, I just want it to go back to the planning commission and they can send it back just like they did before, and that's okay with me. Now, that was one of the members of the Board of County Commission.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, staff is trying to give us an option to deal with this particular request, an application that's come in from a citizen. Staff is recommending that we deny the request as it's come in to us, and they're giving us an option to provide for a framework that can be used until we get to the land development code. But at this point, what they've given us, you know, the 2 categories of off-site and on-site.
So, one question. So what is the procedure if I wanted to come in and open up a commercial sawmill right now before anything happens? What is the procedure if I wanted to come into Putnam County and open up a sawmill, a commercial sawmill?
So assuming that the property's properly zoned, then you would move to the Development Review Committee. At that point, you would submit engineered site plans showing the locations of structures, access, drainage, et cetera. And the developer would simply work with the DRC to hash out any conflicts with the Land Development Code, and then they'd receive their final development order from the DRC and move on to the technical review, which is the building permit review.
6 minutes yet.
So if your new plan is basically, you're just saying I'll come in and do a special use, but I don't have to show them a site plan of here's how I'm gonna use the property? Or they can go out in the middle of 100 acres and set up a sawmill and not have a zoning for that? Is that basically it?
The zoning would, if this is incorporated into the agricultural district, then it would allow it, but they would still have to come through DRC. This is a commercial use. Most development has to go through DRC before it commences use.
So if somebody had one of these sawmills and the applicant is referring to a 40 horsepower or less, if they got caught with that, if somebody, the neighbor complained about, hey, that sawmill's too loud, what would happen to them? You just tell them to,
If it's something where they're not using it as just a purely ancillary use to the home, and they're consistently using it and consistently bringing wood in and making more of a primary use of the property as a sawmill with more of an ancillary use as a residence, then it would become a code enforcement case.
from what I understand from the applicant, there's no benefit in doing that with a 40 horsepower or less. You can't produce enough to make it into a business per se, is that?
I can't really speak to that because even one of the commissioners at the county commission advised that they could hook it up to a tractor that's 40 or 50 horsepower and power their sawmill using the tractor.
That's true.
So
Power takeoff.
there's no telling how much they could produce. And then the enforcement of the horsepower on the engine, we'd have to be out there every time someone complained and check the specifications of the engine, and if it's been tampered with for some reason, or if the engine's been replaced.
Yeah, I remember the conversation now.
And I think we have to remember also that the density of the wood going through that particular saw is going to change the pitch of the sound. You put a piece of soft pine through it, it's going to sound one thing, but you put a piece of hard oak through there, it's going to have a higher whine, and it's going to be a different sound. So the intensity of the motor might not be the issue, it's the intensity of the sound. So those things are hard to regulate. It's like the amplified sound ordinance.
I just think if somebody has a complaint, they complain about it, and the people have to do something different. I don't understand the big deal here, I guess, is where I'm.
Well, I think the problem is the question was brought to us and we have to deal with it. You stick your head up, you might get, you might be more aware, people might be more aware of the situation. So any other questions of staff? Oh, boy. All right, at this time, you may go now.
Thank you.
Mr. Hafner has a prior commitment, and he has to go home or he'll be in big trouble.
I have to apologize to Mr. Morris because I think I left at the same time.
You did.
Would you please tell Mama that no more dinner parties on the second Wednesday of the month?
Next time, don't put Mr. Morris at the end.
All right, Mr. Morris, we'll bring you forward. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Before you start, I do have a couple questions I want to ask.
All right.
Who are you representing?
I am representing myself and a handful of other hobby mill owners.
And who are those other hobby mill owners?
Do not want their names disclosed.
Please give us your name and address first.
My name is Justin Morris, 180 Stokes Landing Road. Yes, please.
All right. They don't want their names given.
No, they do not. And
So they want to.
The reason for that is because the way that the Land Development Code sits right now and only deals with sawmills in one lump scenario, everybody that owns a sawmill that does not have a special use permit can easily be viewed at, through codes enforcement, as non-compliant.
Absolutely. Now, why do you want to remove the special use permit requirement?
Because it's, number one, as a lot of the people have talked about, it's your own property. You should be able to use equipment that's not bothering other folks.
If it's ancillary to your home, you should be able to use it, correct?
That's correct.
If it's not ancillary to your home and you're using it
Okay.
as a sawmill in a commercial way, it's a different.
I'll address that too. Commissioner Rawls hit it on the head in the previous commission meeting. He said one of the things that we need to be looking at, this commission, the Board of County Commissioners, is what he termed the cottage industry.
That was one of the terms that came up, yes.
And I'm sure you guys are probably all aware of what that is. That's people that are not doing functions as their primary source of income. Let's take these hobby mills as an example. If I cut up 5 or 10 trees and my friend helps me and I give him or trade him because he provided the wood or I sell a few pieces of the wood to help me offset some of the operating expenses of my cost, as soon as I sell that stuff, some would classify that immediately as commercial business,
All right, I'm going to go back to my question.
okay?
Why not follow the current land development code and obtain a special use permit for these applications?
Okay, the current land development code only cites wood in agricultural zoning where, or sawmills in agricultural zoning where wood comes from on site. If I say I am setting up a sawmill or I have a sawmill where I bring wood in from off-site, there is zero verbiage in the land development code that addresses that.
All right, again, I'm asking you, the current code requires a special use permit. Why are you wanting to get rid of that?
The current code does not address, through special use permit, a sawmill where it comes from off-site. That's what I'm saying. That is the hole in the land development code right now in,
All right.
in agricultural
And we
zoning.
have spoken about how we're going to be revising that land development code. But I still want to know and want to get to the root. You're representing people.
I'll give you a simpler answer than that. The simpler answer is hobby mills, sawmills, small-scale sawmills, which I delineated as 40 horsepower or less,
Well-
but however you choose to delineate a small scale, my hopes were that after the first meeting that you guys did some homework and did a little investigation in what different classifications of sawmills.
We've done our homework, I can assure you.
No, I understand.
But-
So let me finish my statement. So in all of that classification, the limited scale of the equipment should not have the heavy hand of regulation.
All right.
The SUP process is difficult and expensive, $750
Okay.
is what it costs just to apply. That's not guaranteeing anything. A lot of these people that are cutting wood don't have $750 to come down here and hope that you guys say it's okay for them to run a machine that is essentially a tool that they can fit in their vehicle.
Okay.
So that's
Thank
the
you for that
frustration with the
Thank you for
SUP.
that answer. Now, you have requested this amendment to the Land Development Code. Staff is recommending that the request that you have placed be denied. We upheld that at the last meeting. We'll revisit it today. Staff has come back in and said, in lieu of the request, this is what we recommend. Now, we're in that catch-22 situation where this has now been brought to the attention of this body, of staff, the planning and development staff, which also includes codes enforcement. This has been brought to the attention of the county commission. It's been brought to the attention of anybody that wants to see it. So now this is on the radar screen.
I agree with that.
And that is not on us.
Well, this board,
Not debating
as
you.
an entity, has the ability to not care what staff says and not care what I say and make up whatever rules you guys want to fit into the verbiage.
We absolutely do have that
And
authority.
that is the direction that the county commission gave at the last meeting.
Okay.
You guys chose to kick the can down the road, and they said, no, you're not kicking the can
All
down
right.
the road.
They also said that we can bring it back to them in the same
Something out.
exact recommendation that we had made before. Now, we have an obligation. We're also sitting on the cusp of beginning the complete and thorough review of the Land Development Code, which is where we're going to be looking at all different land uses, not just sawmills, not swimming pools, but everything.
So why not start here? We
No,
can start
because
here
we're
tonight.
not in the
We can
process
start right
yet.
here. You have a topic ahead of us right here. There's a clearly defined deficiency in the
Okay.
land development code, and we could address it. But let me start this by saying, in the handout that I gave you, we've missed a big portion of what my original intent
Okay,
of my
I've
application
started
was.
your 5 minutes again. Go ahead.
Okay, well, all right. So in the original intent of my application was to make a path for compliance for small-scale sawmill owners. Call it a hobby mill, call it a personal mill, call it a small-scale mill, however you want to. I chose an easily way to delineate that. I don't care how you guys do it, but there should be a path to compliance for that. That was the original intent of the verbiage that I wanted changed in the land development code. I don't care how you guys massage that or how you add to or take away. I think probably some of the regulations that staff is quoting as far as distance from a resident is a good idea. I think 500 feet is too far. The 15-acre minimum, I think, is too large, too. Turner Sawmill, which is one of the commercial sawmills in the county, operates on 5 acres of property, a full-blown commercial. If you'll look at the pictures that I put on the handout there, that picture there is Turner Sawmill, takes up full 5 acres, and is 370 feet to the first residence closest to them. There's 3 or 4 residents not owned by the mill owner, the mill operator, owned by other people, 370 feet. So it's closer than the 500 feet recommendation that we put in there. So I don't think that this, if you guys were to say, be 200 feet away from a residence and be on a minimum of 5 acres, I think that's completely legit. I think that's a way to go for these sawmills. But again, what he's talking about here with going an avenue for a commercial mill through a SUP is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the small scale mills. I'm not saying there shouldn't be a regard for distance and minimum acreage. Like I said, I think these are too much, but you should be able to, through the course of the land development code, if I meet this and this and this and this, then I'm okay without contacting staff, without putting in an application, without going through the costly and time-consuming effort of getting a special use permit. A citizen should be able to read and execute a plan without having to consult the powers that be. There should be a path there that a normal person could read. Again, I don't care how you put the verbiage together that is. Me being the simplistic, pragmatic person said 40 horsepower, there you go. That's not a problem, because I've been around sawmills long enough to know that if you've got less than 40 horsepower, you're not a nuisance as far as noise goes, because it's relatively, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying it's a quiet procedure, but I can crank up a chainsaw on my property this afternoon and cut every tree down on it, cut it up into firewood, and have a bonfire until the cows come home. That chainsaw is just as loud or louder than the sawmill. So under 40 horsepower, you don't have the capacity to move enough wood. To your concern about log trucks, the mills that I'm referring to do not take timber in log truck loads. They take them 1 or 2 pieces at the time. They're coming on a car trailer from a friend's house. There's not the capacity of timber that you envision when you're thinking about a sawmill. So that's my issue with everything up here stems from 3 problems. One of 3 problems. Either number 1, you don't understand the classification between these sawmills. Everything's getting lumped into one. Number 2, you don't know how to put into words or to delineate where those different levels of sawmills start and stop. Or number 3, you just believe that the planning and zoning and the government should be able to micromanage that small equipment. So it's one of those 3 conditions there that if the belief is, yeah, everything that the citizens of Putnam County do needs to be regulated by the government, then there's no way we're going to get past this. But if the issue is
Give you 30
we don't
seconds.
understand what we're doing, or not what we're doing, but we don't understand how to delineate, or we don't know how to put that into language, then that's the direction. It shouldn't be just because we don't know how to do it means we should lump it all into one and say no to it and put the most stringent requirements on it.
I'm going to bring you to a conclusion. Thank you. We appreciate your coming forward. Now, I'm going to address a couple of things. You may please be seated. We do understand the different classifications. We've been edified. We have also had time for 2 months to review this, and we also have had time to review it since we found that this was coming back to us. We do know how to put things into words, and we know how to articulate, and we know how to write. And it's no one's intent to micromanage anyone, but it is our intent to take care of the citizens of Putnam County and the businesses of Putnam County so that no one is impinged upon by someone else's actions. Now, I think we've got two things before us. Mr. Perry, correct me if I'm wrong. We have the original request to approve an amendment to the Land Development Code as it was brought to us, dealing with sawmills of 40 horsepower or less.
That's not true.
Pardon?
That's not true. The way I read it, what staff is saying is it is all sawmills.
Right, but wait a minute. Mr. Morris's request that we have to deny. We have to approve or deny that. If we deny it, then we move to staff's
I apologize.
recommendation. And then staff's recommendation has been amended from what it was in February. Am I correct on that? We got that, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Discussion on, number one, let's discuss as a board the request that has come before us to amend the Land Development Code as originally stated from Mr. Morrison. Gabriel, would you please restate that, his original request?
Certainly. I'll read the request. Give me just a moment here. Okay, the applicant's originally proposed text amendment would have included a change to, section 45-59, the allowance for a sawmill where wood, so it would have deleted the text where wood is grown from trees. I'm sorry, my vision is like, where wood is from trees grown on the site of the sawmill, deleted that statement and required where the sawmill is powered by a motor not to exceed 40 horsepower. Now that is still under commercial agriculture related and would still have required a special use permit. The other change was to section 45-72, which does not require a special use permit. And it would have been the addition of a specific use which reads sawmills for personal use, where the sawmill is powered by a motor not to exceed 40 horsepower. And that concludes what the...
And that would have been to eliminate the need for an SUP.
Correct.
If the sawmill was less than 40 horsepower.
That's right.
Okay. All right, so now that Zach has restated that to us, what is the board's pleasure? Staff has recommended denial of that. Does the board want to accept staff's recommendation and deny this, or does staff want to reject does the board want to reject staff's recommendation and approve it?
I have a comment first.
Okay, you may make a comment.
At the county commission meeting that I was in
Okay.
attendance of,
Are you
All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you speak into the
Microphone.
I
microphone?
got it on this time.
You speak into it.
Speaking to Jerry, since you want to point this way.
I'll move over this way. How's that?
That's better.
Okay. At that meeting, am I allowed to mention what commissioner said what?
I think everybody had ample opportunity to see that.
I didn't. I would like to hear it.
Okay.
I didn't see it either.
I think we probably need to go back to the original and review it if we're going to talk about who said what.
Well-
Based on somebody's memory, I'd rather see the actual tape.
Commissioner Rawls was speaking to me
Okay, well,
when I was right there at that little stand.
you were talking about the cottage industry.
No. I asked the question if the county commission would give our planning commission guidance in what they wanted. And his response was, no.
That's right, they can't. They're not supposed to.
No, we would prefer you citizens to come up with something on your own. But then when I get this stuff from staff, that's under the guidance from the county commission, and you want us to vote on that as opposed to...
We're not into that yet. We're still looking at whether we're going to accept or deny the request as it's come from Mr. Morris? Are we going to throw out staff's recommendation of denial, or are we going to approve staff's recommendation of denial? Has nothing to do with anything that was said at the county commission. We'll address that in a minute.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can I speak?
Yes, sir.
I think we can make a motion to accept what the applicant has given and add some verbiage to that. Do we have that latitude?
We certainly can amend anything that comes before us.
I would like to make a motion that we approve what the applicant has, first of all, the way I feel is if it's possible that we could just say, look, sawmills is a small sawmill, if there's nobody complaining about it, treat it like a lawnmower, chainsaw, anything else. They don't have to have any kind of permit for that. I do think it's ridiculous to have to pay $750 to come up and have a sawmill in your yard. I mean, realistically, if there's these little sawmills, I just don't see it. Now, if there's a complaint by the neighbor, hopefully we can come up with some verbiage just saying, look, okay, I don't know what that is. We have noise ordinances and other things where you hold up a little thing and there's a noise ordinance.
We have an
Or if you-
amplified sound ordinance, but that's.
And we can put back, a restriction of 250 feet from the property line. It's a minimum of 5 acres. I mean, I would like to see something like that. I particularly think, and I love staff, but I particularly think it's a little stiff for what we're trying to, for just the small sawmills, like he's saying. And I know you don't have any means of going out and testing the horsepower. But if somebody comes out and complains about, if somebody next to my house starts a sawmill and they become a nuisance, I'm gonna find out why, and I'll complain to the county, and if they're in violation, they're in violation.
May I address that point?
Please.
And I want to clarify again, the intent of the staff recommendation is not to include small-scale operations, hobby operations, the use of a hobby saw in that definition at all. They would not have to come for a special use permit. The difficulty in putting a use in there and then putting criteria for a hobby saw is that now you necessarily exclude certain people that may be conforming now because there are no criteria, and make their use non-conforming. So if, for instance, the commission decides to add a 5-acre limitation on it or a setback requirement, and we have a hobby saw that's being used maybe once every 2 weeks, and it's only 10 feet away from a property line, now they cannot use their saw anymore. Well, they can use it for uninterruptedly until the use is discontinued, and then they can't use it anymore. And so that's the difficulty in that.
Sir, if nobody is complaining about that saw obviously they don't have a permit to use the saw now, or they don't have a right to use the saw now, from what, am I missing something here?
They do.
A hobby saw, they do have the right to use. If the saw is something you have in your garage that you use as a hobby, or that you use to create wood or timber or lumber to use in your home or to use on your property, that's fine. That's not what we're addressing here. It's what is being addressed in the recommendation from staff. Now, we've still got 2 things going on here. We've got one, we can amend what the applicant has requested. Are we at a position where we can do that? The reason to wait with the Land Development Code revision is because we are bringing in guidance to help us with that. Right now, we're just 7 people, or 6 people now sitting up here. Some of us have operated a saw. But, and I certainly have, and don't laugh.
I'm not laughing. I'm laughing that a minute ago you said y'all had done your homework and you know.
Yes, we have.
7 people. You guys are the ones that make the rules.
Okay, Mr. Morris, we do make the rules. We don't make the rules. We make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and they make the rules. You're not on the record, Mr. Morris, and I'm going to stop you. Now, I think the distinction and the thing we're hanging up on is the difference between a hobby saw where the wood comes from your property and a saw where the wood comes from off-site. And that's what staff is delineating in their recommendation. But we can insert their recommendations into the original request and massage it and turn it around. It's going to take us a while. We can certainly do that. We did that copiously with the comprehensive plan. And if that's what we want to do tonight, then that's what we're going to do tonight. Or do we want, where do we stand on the original request as it stands? Because it's going to have to be amended if we do anything to it.
All right, I have a question for Gabriel.
Sure.
If that's okay. So the reason Mr. Morris brought this up to start with is because there's no place in the Land Development Code currently that specifically says you can have a hobby farm or a hobby saw without getting a special use permit. Kind of what I see.
Let Gabriel answer that first.
If I may clarify that, the initial intent as expressed by the applicant was the result of a special use permit that was brought before the Zoning Board of Adjustments that was approved, but was claimed to have been a hobby saw by, excuse me.
Stop it.
By
Stop.
the.
Mr. Morris, I'm going to ask you to leave if you make one more outburst. All right. We're not going to make stuff up. All right, stop. All right.
I,
All right.
and I haven't
I am
finished
not
the
going to let you argue with
clarification,
staff.
The record will reflect, if anyone would like to watch that video, we'll be happy to provide the minutes as well, that this was the impetus for the Land Development Code amendment. It was later framed in a different manner as a hobby sawmill, that there were many people that had hobby sawmills that were scared because of the action of the Zoning Board of Adjustments. That's my understanding of the intent of this, and that's it.
And we've got two different classes. We've got that hobby saw that is in your garage, that you drag out to your backyard, you drag out to the back acreage on your property, and you use occasionally.
Correct. That's right. And that needs to be just totally separated from what the staff is recommending here, because the staff is recommending what was originally requested, which is to allow a sawmill like what the applicant in the special use case that was brought before the ZBOA to bring wood from off-site. And the applicant now will admit that that was a commercial operation. But the contention was that he could not bring the wood from off-site. It was being brought from off-site and dumped at the front of the property, and there were complaints by the neighbors. And so he was approved for it with several conditions, including enclosure of that sawmill operation.
And Mr. Perry, I see you nodding your head up and down. I take it you were at that ZBOA meeting?
The most recent one?
I'm talking about the one with the sawmill.
ZBOA meeting?
Yeah, it's the one with Mr. Buckles had brought a case forward.
Yes, I was.
On 19.
That's right.
When was that meeting? Do you remember?
I'll look right now. It must have been October. I can tell you right now what that meeting date was, but it was last year.
All right.
But my
And
intent.
was that SUP approved?
It was.
With conditions?
Correct. But the conditions, from my understanding, were not agreeable to the applicant for that case. And I mean to pass no judgment at all on that case or what was decided then. I don't really want that to influence the discussion here, because I was only trying to explain what the impetus for this was.
Okay, that's what we wanted to know.
It said that
that's the reason that he made this, that's the reason the applicant made the applicant because of that case?
That was the impetus for it, for this Land Development Code text amendment, because there was supposedly fear after that case. I'm not sure where the fear is coming from. It was approved, legitimized completely. He can, let me not use the name of the applicant anymore. The applicant can continue to use that, but again, that case has really nothing to do with what staff is recommending here, other than that it evolved into what the now applicant is requesting.
So when we asked before if there had been complaints, and we're told no, that really, there were complaints. But
Well, I expressed that there was the one complaint about the buckles.
I don't-
I'm sorry, I keep
Previous one,
mentioning.
yes.
I don't remember
property.
that, but I'm
Well, we
sure you
weren't,
did.
it wasn't us.
Right.
But other complaints regarding personal use saws, none that I'm aware of. That was a commercial operation.
The rest of my question was, what staff is recommending, I know that's different than what Mr. Morris was asking for, two different things, but it seems to me more like this is more a pathway to a commercial sawmill versus a small
Hobby
scale
saw.
thing.
Correct.
Okay, I mean, I just feel like that is.
Madam Chairperson,
Yes, sir. Wait a minute, are you through?
I'm sorry.
I guess, for now.
Go ahead, Mr. DeSantis.
You know, we've been here before, and just the situation that we just had should have been totally avoided. If we postponed this like we had said at the beginning meeting, or last month's meeting, or February's meeting, where we all have time to review it, because we're looking at two completely different things here. Commercial and hobby shop. Or
Well,
hobby-
we're also looking at gaps in the land development code that
And no
need to
matter
be
what we
filled.
do, we're not going to satisfy anybody tonight. And I think we've got to give it a whole lot more thought. I mean, we've got to look at the whole picture. You got those people who are afraid of making, if the ordinance got passed the way it was recommended, they're going to be out of business. Because they got the little hobby shop, and the people are bringing wood in from outside, and they're not on 5 acres or 10 acres. So they're going to be worried about, are they going to be in trouble with the county? Let's cool it. We're not going to solve it tonight.
And I think one of the big issues here, maybe using the term personal and hobby saw is not the right way to classify this, but using a saw for personal use only versus using a saw where money is exchanged.
I would excuse me, madam, I would
That's okay.
disagree with that. And the only reason is if somebody's trying to make some side money with a little bit of sawmill, and I really, after looking into this thing, I believe that what the applicant is trying to say is the sawmills that he's trying to say that he's trying to get is a middle gap. It's a gap. It's not the one that he keeps in his garage, and it's not one that is a commercial one. It's in between there. And I think he's the one that came up with the 40 horsepower. If you've got a 40 horsepower, it's not gonna be a commercial use, but yet you can bring a few trees in. If Jeb Tootin's cutting some trees and he brings a few trees in and they cut a few boards out of it, so what? I mean, I think it's gotta be to the point to where I would almost like to, I don't even, just make them like if there's a complaint, then there's a complaint, then you got to deal with it. But I don't know.
So do we leave it like it is?
I mean, that's kind of what we did last time, thinking it would go away, and it goes back to the county
You thought it would
commissioner, and the
go
county
away?
commissioner says, no, y'all need to send it back. I mean,
Well, this would come back up when we do the land development code.
Yeah.
Now, this is only right now, what we're talking about is only in areas that are zoned agriculture, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So this has nothing to do with your saw in your backyard and you have a residential
but
zoning.
he's requesting for it to be in agricultural areas, right? In his request.
He's requesting an addition of a use without criteria that would be allowed by right for a personal use sawmill.
Yeah.
And it's only in the code in the agricultural zoning areas.
Sawmills would be allowed in industrial as well, but
Yeah.
specifically mentioned for on-site sourcing only, it would be in agricultural. But I think something that the applicant had mentioned is very pertinent to this, the use of a chainsaw
Right.
on a piece of property. That is not regulated by the code, and
No.
that's currently allowed as a residential use. And the way that staff is looking at it is, it's the same thing. It's just an ancillary use. If we start calling ancillary uses out and start imposing criteria on those,
Do that.
it's going to create, one, legal issues, because now people have been deprived of uses on their property, but also nonconformities all over.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of different pieces of machinery that generate noise, much of which can be more than what a 40 horsepower saw would generate. I'm thinking a generator.
A generator or, like a pool pump, depending on where a pool pump is located. If you have an old pump like I do, very close to another residence, if we put setbacks on that, now my pool pump becomes non-conforming. It's just an example, but.
Right, and there are a lot of different situations like that. And I think there's a lot of this that we don't even need to touch. We don't need to touch those ancillary uses to a residence. And I don't think we need to get into that. This is my opinion, I'm not speaking officially, but I really don't think we need to get into trying to regulate what people can do on their property as long as it's not creating a nuisance.
A nuisance, that's, if there's a way that we can put that in there, I'm fine with that.
But how do you have a sawmill on a 1 acre piece of property in an area that may be zoned agricultural, but has residences on it in the area? How do you make that without making a nuisance?
There was a sawmill on a 1 acre tract right next to my property. I own property on two sides of it, in front of it and on the side of it, and not a problem. They brought in logs, they made
Timber, they cut lumber.
1x12s, 1x8s, 1x4s, 2x4s. It's not a problem with that.
But what if you were to sell your property and someone bought it who immediately found that as an impingement upon their personal rights?
Well, there's other people that live next door to it also. Nobody seemed to complain. All these little guys that are doing the hobby mills, most of them are doing boards, either selling them or giving them to their neighbors anyway, to make tables, to make shelving. It's not a commercial business. Now, if you got code enforcement comes out and there's 12 employees, that's a commercial business.
It's a commercial business.
Now, if I'm there and I don't have two sons, but let's say I had two sons, and it's me and my two sons, that's not a commercial business neither. But if you come out, if you got employees are pretty easy to track.
Well, there's so many gray areas in this situation. Go ahead, Aaron.
I just keep going back to that this, like the staff's recommendations seems to give it more.
Rigidity?
No, I agree with some of the things, but it seems to create a path to a commercial sawmill without having the commercial zoning that would be required for commercial sawmill. So that, it seems like it's giving a higher use to ag land than what was in, what
More
should
intense
be.
use, yeah.
That's correct. It's located under the commercial uses that are allowed in ag.
Ag-related. But typically, if I'm gonna have a sawmill, say like,
The Turner Sawmill or?
the one out on 17 that does the mulch, is that a commercial zoning or is that an ag zoning?
Or industrial?
I can't recall right now. I think it may be a non-conforming use, but not to make anyone.
Right, no.
Let's not kick any
I'm
more
not sure. It
cans
may be
over.
conforming. I haven't looked at it, but
What would that require in today's code? What would the zoning be required for that?
industrial.
Okay.
But
It is industrial,
use
I do
permit.
remember that.
the idea is to not relegate all sawmills to industrial districts.
Right. But it seems to me your regulations are opening up more commercial sawmill uses
In ag.
in ag,
Yes, ma'am.
which wasn't the intention of the applicant as I understand it anyway.
Now, his original request was only in the ag zoning area, wasn't it?
Correct, and it was a request to develop something to allow off-site sourcing. That's why he struck that first, under the provisions
Right.
for.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable
The
myself.
off-site is perfectly fine. I mean, that's what, I'd much rather cut it up and use it for boards in my house, your house, or my neighbor's house than to kick it out here and burn it and/or put it in the landfill.
And staff doesn't have a problem with off-site. Let me just reiterate that there are three different things that we're looking at here. The hobby use, ancillary to a residence, then the two different commercial uses that would be allowed in agriculture, the on-site sourcing and the off-site sourcing, which would be required to have additional criteria. Over half of the county is zoned agricultural, including several
70%.
subdivisions, even gated subdivisions. Nobles Crossing is one of them. If we do not have criteria and we allow any kind of sawmill to go in there, someone, putting aside covenants that we don't enforce, could set up shop in one of the residential districts. So staff has no problem, as evidenced by the proposal by staff, with off-site sourcing. And to further clarify, the hobby saw, not sawmill, the hobby saw, naturally, someone's going to be sourcing that off-site. If you have a small piece of property, you're not going to have logs to cut down. You're going to be going to Home Depot, or you're going to be going to a friend's house and maybe cutting a tree there. That's why we don't want to get into the regulation of those hobby saws, because now it was floated, I think, at the previous commission meeting, and then at another meeting, that maybe we could regulate the number of logs coming in, or the number of trucks, or it's impossible to do that with our current staff, and it's not a situation where we want to be asking people like, oh, produce papers for me. Are you an employee, or are you kin to this person? We don't want to be in that position at all.
But excuse me, if we added in the verbiage, not to be for commercial use, because if I had a personal saw and I sold some to Ken or somebody else, that's not really commercial.
Right, we would then.
You would not consider
We
that.
would have to define commercial under that use.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
then we get into employee definitions and volume of logs, which is something that we really don't want to get into with the hobby saws. I mean,
I think if
if
we
it's
take
something that
we keep our nose out of the hobby business and just you guys regulate the industrial and commercial people, I have no problem with that. My problem is you telling me, the citizen, what I can do. This is Palatka, Putnam County.
I'm not understanding what the confusion is, and I'm sorry to.
I think we're crossing hairs here over we're trying to mix apples and oranges, and it's not working.
That's right.
When it's okay right now, and we're not touching for the future right now, anything dealing with your personal tools that you use in your home, or you use in your garage or your backyard. You could go to Home Depot and buy every tool Ryobi makes. You could order from Works and buy every tool they make. You can have every tool Champion makes, because that's an ancillary use to your home. But if you go out and buy a mill operation, like the second picture that has been shown here, that's a sawmill. That's not a hobby saw. I think we're getting our hairs crossed there. That's a
This
sawmill.
bottom thing?
That's a saw.
I think that would be considered a hobby saw.
That's a hobby
Yeah,
saw.
that is a hobby saw.
That's a
Gabriel?
hobby saw.
I agree.
I'm not sure where that picture was taken. I'd rather not comment on that, but that appears to be a residential use saw, but I don't know where that picture was taken. It could have been a portion of the picture on top. I have no idea.
It was taken in Putnam County.
No,
All right.
the top one, the
Okay.
top
Now,
one
if you
is-
didn't have
Top one's that
communication with
curve.
somebody, how do you know that?
That's what he said.
Okay.
Yeah, he said the top one was
Yeah.
a commercial
That's in
site.
Putnam.
That's what's
The
evidenced
bottom
in
one
the
is a
document.
hobby site, is what he said.
I'm not sure I call that a hobby saw, but
But
that's
it
just.
is.
It is.
Exactly what that is. It's under 40 horsepower. That's a hobby saw.
Well, we haven't adopted that 40 horsepower.
No, but that's what they're doing, bringing logs in to cut. They're not bringing log trucks in, you're bringing in, your neighbor cut a tree down, and
You would
he
never
brings it in
bring
12-foot
log trucks in
sections.
and use that saw to cut.
No.
And another,
It'll be wore out in 2 months.
Yes.
if I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to just state that any kind of ordinance that we put forth has to be based on some sort of rational basis. I have no idea where the 40 horsepower comes from as a rational basis, as the delineating line for not a nuisance and a nuisance. I really, without a further study of that, it would be very difficult to say we have based this ordinance with a rational basis, or excuse me, we've passed this ordinance. But I also want to clarify that this commission has the ability to recommend as it pleases. You may disregard staff's recommendation. We're only here to provide guidance. You may do as you please, and then send your recommendation on to the Board of County Commissioners, just as they may do as they please. I'm just trying to guide in the capabilities of what staff can and can't enforce.
If we go with what you said we legally can do right now is have this hobby, no permits required, no special use required. The only thing we gotta do to add to that, I mean, I don't see any problem adding the 40 horsepower because that's really not for nuisance, that's more or less for commercial as opposed to personal use. So the 40 horsepower is probably a good thing for sensible people to put in. But we want to add, it's all right for tree services to drop off some trees that we can cut up without having to go get a special use permit and spend $750. I mean, a few of us could probably handle that, but like he said, these ordinary people, my tenants, they don't have no money. I can tell you what they've got.
Okay,
right.
so.
I would
All right.
like to see us make it where it's, and I know it's not following staff's recommendations, but if we use the 40 horsepower, we add no commercial use. If, I know you can't regulate that, but if there is a complaint, then it's a lot easier to start trying to regulate that.
All right, but we've
You
got to
know, I
define
mean,
commercial.
then there's a complaint, you know, and then and then also, it has to be so many feet away from a property line. I think 200 feet, 250 feet.
All right.
Shoot, do we let people out there ride those daggum machines out there within 100 feet of the property line, and we didn't have a problem with that? But yet this guy's trying to do a sawmill, and we got a real problem with it.
And I think those machines probably make a lot more
I think so,
noise than
too.
this. Especially when there's 50 of them at one time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to bring this in. Things I see. We don't have a clear definition in code of commercial versus personal, sawmill versus hobby saw. Those definitions do not exist in code. So if we're going to adopt something applying to those definitions, or to those things, wouldn't we have to have those definitions in code?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm looking at Mr. Perry, too.
Oh, I agree with Gabriel, that there has to be a rational basis, there has to be
So we can define a personal sawmill pretty much any way we want to. We can define a hobby saw pretty much any way we want to. Is that correct?
You
Within
could,
guidelines.
based on, what was that?
Within guidelines and standard practices.
Correct, yes. It's within the competence, as long as it's, I'd caution if it's defining it in a way that's going to deprive current hobby saw users, it is not recommended. So if we
Right.
if you place definitions for commercial, including employees, amounts sold, things like that, that we would never have the ability to enforce or would make some non-conforming, then that would be problematic, but
And if we leave too many vagueness, vagarities in there, that just creates more
The
problems.
40 horsepower takes care of that problem, because it's not gonna be used for commercial use, because it just won't hold up.
It's just not it can't be used for commercial use.
So if we use the 40 horse, whether you like it or the county commission likes it, we can give it to them, and then they can, I mean, I think they're gonna like it, because they sorta liked it when they had their meeting.
So
so
they
the
had their meeting.
The county commission
Oh,
meeting.
okay.
And we,
With or without a special, without a special use permit, we're going to allow any sawmill under 40 horsepower to be operated. Is that what we're saying? Is that what you?
To be operated within so many feet away from a property line, and I think we should have an acreage of 5, or let's pick an acreage. I don't care if it's 1 acre, but it needs to be 200 feet away from any residence.
And if I may recommend also, it sounds like the commission would like to hash this out at the commission level before it gets sent to the BOCC. It doesn't have to be decided today necessarily. The commission could call for a workshop the following month or any other any other time. It just needs to be duly noticed, and direct staff to do some research. Now, if that's the direction, we would have to have exactly what you would like us to research and enough time to research it. We could do that and bring it back to the Planning Commission, and this item could be tabled.
It could be you could bring back a comprehensive amendment to the Land Development Code that would probably be what we would have done when we got to that section when we were doing it.
We could, I mean, the resources that we'll have with the consultant we won't have now.
Right, that's the thing that I was worried about.
But if you wanted to take a little longer and have us go back, we can do additional research with more counties. We did surrounding counties research. We can go a little further.
What was the case with surrounding counties? Do they require special use permits?
Zach, would you like to speak to that? I think the answer to that is yes, or a special exception or certain criteria, but I'll let Zach speak to that.
Okay.
I looked at all of the surrounding adjacent counties as well as the 5 municipalities here in Putnam County. All of them require a special use permit or only allow sawmills in an industrial setting.
you're back to commercial again.
Yeah,
Well, no, that's sawmills, period.
Well, you
Sawmills.
see, when you use that word sawmills,
yeah.
that is where you're going off, there's where you're going on the tangent. You're over here with this industrial, commercial stuff, and you got the rest of us citizens over here. We need to forget about sawmills. We're not
But
arguing.
that's what this is about.
This was what was requested of us, and so we're using the language that was requested of us. Again, we're not trying to pigeonhole citizens into a commercial designation. That is the exact opposite of what we're doing here. If we had been doing that, we would have recommended that all sawmills, regardless of size, regardless of ancillary status, would be included in that commercial regulation, but we didn't do that. And I wish it weren't characterized in that manner, because I think somehow that's the message that's getting across, when that's the exact opposite of what staff has attempted to do here.
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that we table this, we go to a workshop with the BOCC.
With the
And-
BOCC? We can't.
Well, like we had a workshop yesterday, actually.
They had a workshop.
They had a workshop, I was in it, but it was on another subject, but we could go before them and tell them and discuss it out in the open, just like we're doing now. And then they could kind of give us direction of what they're thinking, and we can kind of get their feelings and our feelings. I particularly feel like the 40 horsepower is a reasonable thing, but I don't know either. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know, but this fellow, he seemed to feel like that's I think his intent is good. I know
I think his intent is good. I think his approach is a little bit
I think he's aggravated because we probably don't think the way he does or whatever, but
Well,
I think
it bothers me when we're dealing with this, when we don't have firm definitions, and I agree with the workshop. When we don't have firm definitions and we're not looking at site-specific.
Yeah.
That's my hang-up, because it's a whole lot different to have somebody put a sawmill out in the middle of a 500 tract of agricultural land, and to put a sawmill on a 5-acre residential lot that's in that's in an ag land classification that has, neighbors around. They're totally different, and I think the site-specific, and I think you may not always have to have that 500 feet, you may not always have to have 200 feet, but I think it has to be site-specific.
I understand that, Adam, but the problem is the $750 in the 4 or 6 months it takes to get that to happen. I mean, if somebody's just trying to saw some wood, and it seems like we're making a lot more out of this than we really need to, but I think it sounds like if we give the staff recommendation of determining, maybe do a study and say, here, what is a commercial sawmill? I mean, at what level is a sawmill commercial? Might be another.
Do you look at output? Do you look at input? Do you look at, money turned over? Do you look at, number of employees? All of those things.
Well, I
Is
think,
motor capacity a good?
That's probably what,
Yeah.
in this bottom picture, the zero turn is probably 30 horsepower. Most of them are 25 to 30 horsepower on a good zero turn. So he's just trying to compare that. That same motor is probably on that sawmill, 30 horse or more.
You think that zero turn is powering that sawmill?
No,
that motor
same
could.
motor would.
The
Same motor would.
same motor
Same
could.
capacity of the motor.
Yeah, same capacity. Oh, definitely.
I particularly feel like I wish it had never come here, because I think
Me too.
it's kind of a moot point, and we've spent hours on this thing but it sounds like it needs to be addressed by some people that feel uncomfortable that they're gonna be put in jail or whatever.
I'd rather just wait for the land development code so we have an expert and we can
That's
draw our own conclusion
that's what we
about
sent
the
them the
thing.
first time. Do we want to send that back to the commission?
Yeah, I'll send it back to them. I don't
We
care.
need to put it in that verbiage.
Right,
That wasn't the verbiage they received at that meeting.
well, what did we,
I don't know what we did, but I know they were a little bit confused.
We
well, I
denied
think the
it. Basically, we denied it.
situation has been confused. I'm not sure what we did. What we recommended was that we put this off, not put it off, but defer this until the time that the Land Development Code addresses sawmills, and then address it thoroughly in the Land Development Code revision, and do nothing at this point.
I have no problem with that.
Where are the minutes?
My biggest problem I have is the staff, the commercial aspect of it against the individual aspect of it.
Recommend not making any changes to address sawmills at the time, and address sawmills when the Land Development Code is reviewed by the Planning Commission. Mr. Santos seconded. And later made a motion to deny case 21005, which was the request to amend the Land Development Code. So that's what we sent to the Board of County Commissioners.
Maybe we need bigger letters.
Pictures?
Pictures, yeah, they understand pictures.
Maybe
I saw something the other day, this is totally off the track. but
That's
need
what
it.
we decided after about 2 hours of discussion back in February. That we didn't have enough information to satisfy all of the different problems that would come up.
after thorough discussion, do we want to sustain the decision, the recommendation we sent in February?
I say we make a motion that we go right back and do the same thing we did in February
We make it bigger.
and delay it till we do our master review plan.
I just want to just go on record as saying that I think that we should definitely consider in the land development code making some sort of pathway for a personal use saw for these people that, that doesn't have to go through the special use
Oh,
permit.
yeah, and I think-
As long as they meet the criteria.
Right. But we got to get some.
And I understand your point, Gabriel, is that you don't want to get into regulating what you already think is an ancillary use. And I do agree.
Okay, thank you,
That
sir.
too, so it is.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 5. We can do it. Okay, thank you, Mr. DeSantis. All right,
So we just have to come up with that.
somebody put that in the form of a motion and let Nancy get it down real good.
I thought he just did.
Well, you got to state a vote. You can't walk out on a motion you're making.
I'll second it.
And I'm sorry, would you mind restating your motion,
He's going to
Member
do that.
DeSantis?
That's why he's come back to the, speaking to the mic so Nancy gets it on record.
Use mine, I got it, yours don't work.
And
I move that
action
we-
has to be taken on the request of the applicant. You can ignore the staff's, but the request of the applicant, something has to be done with
Now, we
that.
got to deny the request of the applicant and defer any
Right.
decisions to Land Development Code,
So moved.
which
Would you-
sustains exactly what we did in February.
Do we want to deny?
We have to.
We have to do that.
We have to either deny it or approve it. We don't have a choice on that.
Well,
Our recommendation has to be to either
we
deny
denied
it
it
or.
last time and it come right back to us.
So we deny it again.
So we do it again. And they told us we could do that.
As long as it comes right back to us, correct?
It's got to.
Well, well, in the land development code,
We will defer it until we get to that portion of the Land Development Code, and then we will thoroughly address sawmills
All the
and all of
possibilities.
its bits and pieces.
But we can't.
So
we can't
Commissioner
defer.
DeSantis, would you mind restating that, please?
I move that we reject the item before us from the application, and we postpone any decisions further until our review of the master land use plan.
Okay?
Okay?
Yes, sir, thank you.
You're welcome.
second.
Oh, good.
Who was the second on that?
Joey?
Okay, there was a second from Mr. Schwang, so do you?
No, it was Mr. Froelich.
It was
Oh,
Mr. Froelich.
okay.
The first
So it's
time.
basically the same motion we had before.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And I apologize to the board if I was a little harsh on Mr. Morris, but I don't
No, you were
particularly
correct on
appreciate
that.
aggression.
Oh, you were in order. He was out of order.
Okay. Yes, we need to vote on Mr. DeSantis' motion that Mr. Froelich seconded, that we reject the recommendation, or the request from the applicant, basically recommend that case 21005 be rejected, and that we will thoroughly review sawmills and all the things relating to sawmills when we get to that point in the Land Development Code.
I've got that down, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Perry, you've got a quizzical look on your face.
No, ma'am, it's fine. I've just been listening to the discussion, and of course, when Mr. DeSantis first mentioned at the very beginning of the, well, not the beginning of the hearing, that needed more information, as we went along, it became more and more obvious to me that with some of the definitions, some of the information, the technical information that's going to be needed, even when we get to the land development code and actually write it in there, that right now, I think the board is correct, and Madam Chair, you're correct, in that there's just simply not enough information, and that you do have to deny it to move forward to finally reach a solution to this.
Because we have to do something tonight. We can't walk out of here and not do
So,
anything.
Yeah.
And I would hope that when you all are reviewing applicants for the position of consultant to the Land Development Code rewrite, you particularly emphasize somebody that understands sawmills. you know.
See if there's a YouTube on it.
You know, I'm sure there is.
There is.
Can we call a question?
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. All opposed, like sign. Passed 6 to 1. 6 to nothing.
I was gonna say, who voted no this time?
I don't know. Is there any further business, any more old business to come before the board, please? You got business back there, okay.
I'll be back.
Yeah, I've been putting off that business almost too long.
All right, gentlemen. Is there any new or old business that needs to come before the board? Mr.
Quintus?
Quintus?
Or Gabriel, you can address me as
I
Gabriel,
know.
that's fine. Excuse me.
I got you choked up.
Do you, Zachary, remember if there are any items coming before? There are, no. I can tell you no, there are not. There are no rezones and no land use amendments that will be coming before the board at the next meeting. So unless we advise otherwise, the next meeting will not be held unless the commission wishes to hold the meeting to discuss.
Back to us. Discuss
Beat
sawmills
around
again.
sawmills again, yeah.
I'll be talking to Mr. Pickens probably before Mr. Froelich can.
Depends on how fast you get in your car.
My cell phone right here.
You talk to him first.
I'll get him first. You'll get him in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both touched base with our commissioner, and I hope you all do too.
But I will announce that the RFP process is ongoing in search for a consultant. The pre-proposal meeting was held recently, and public records are available to inspect with the Office of General Services. So any member may inspect those records.
Do we have a good pool?
I sit on the committee, so I can't really make a judgment or express
No, you
any.
can't.
But those records are available, so
Do we have more than one?
we do have more than
Okay.
one.
Okay. Do we have more than one that the commission's liable to vote on, the Board of County Commissioners going to approve?
What was that?
Do we have more than one that potentially the Board of County Commissioners will approve?
I can't make a judgment until the rank order has been released. I'm only
When's the county
one.
commission gonna vote on that?
Say again?
When is the county commission gonna vote on that?
In about a month and a half to 2 months.
That'll be part of the consent agenda, right?
I'm not sure. So the way that this will go is we'll rank the 3 highest, and from those 3, the county commission will receive those sealed bids,
Right.
and they'll decide from there which to select.
So that means we got 3 anyway.
Well, we don't know that for sure.
Don't know that.
They rank the top 3, but if it's only 2, it's only 2 they rank. Yeah, that's a process, okay. So you would say that probably around July we'll start this process?
Start it. I'm anticipating it'll take about 2 years to complete,
That's
at
what I
least,
figured.
because such a thorough rewrite is going to take a while.
When is the last time the LDC was updated?
Well, there have been individual code amendments, but a wholesale adoption since 2003.
19 years.
And normally, a wholesale adoption is coupled with a zoning map adoption as well. So we would analyze the,
Well, that's going to be even more fun than the land.
Yeah, that'd
use
be pretty
map.
maps.
so.
Okay. Lord, we pray we don't have another pandemic and have to go into Zoom.
I say we stop it until it's over and then start it again. I just don't think that's
That's
something that you
not we can do, that's
during
right.
Zoom.
Zoom was no.
Zoom was, we got through it, and I think we did a fairly decent job of it, but
We got more accomplished in person in 3 hours than we did 6 hours or 7 or 8
Zoom,
on
yeah,
Zoom.
Zoom's a little carrot, a little bit of a booger. All right, hearing nothing, it's 6:34, this meeting is adjourned.